therefore, how engaged our people element is with the pursuit of our purpose, meaning, and functional disposition to deliver to the customers, it'll depend a lot on the people. So I think that people aspect is very important, and we are rightfully addressing this issue today.
Okay. What about you, Kavita? Anything you would like to say?
Yes, so very beautifully introduced by Rajiv, and I would just like to add that I'm looking forward to this conversation, because for me it's a live example of being engaged, having a community of people who are speaking about something which matters to you, that is in a sense alive, instance
Yes.
of what is engagement. And like Rajiv said, it is about connecting to things which matter to us, and connecting to our purpose and to our values. So I'm really looking forward to the next hour with all of you.
Yeah, it has a lot in consonance with our behavioral, our emotional, our psychological well-being. So that, how are we disposed? So this is a state of our disposition to the organization and whatever it does collectively, more than individually.
Yeah, that's right. And since the topic is, like we have been saying, employee engagement, it's a topic that almost all companies are ensuring that it's alive in their organizations. So in its previous avatar, earlier it used to be called employee satisfaction. Now over the last more than 15 years, it's been called employee engagement. So what is really different between employee satisfaction and employee engagement? So that's to you, Rajiv, for you to answer.
That's a very valid point, because let's start the context setting properly, in the sense that I think, Robin, there are a lot of people who are saying that they are waiting for the host to let them in, sending messages. Just see, can be addressed. Anyway, so to the point, what's important is that the whole context has to be set right as to what is employee engagement firstly. And to set the context around employee engagement, it's important for us to explain what is employee satisfaction. And how was it that things were different earlier? In reality, it was the people element being managed in the work context. So there it remains the same. That has not changed. But what has changed is our purview, is our perspective around involvement of people and how we look at this people component of an organization. Let's begin with the very fact that we've been calling human resources human resource. So people will say that what's new in it, basically. The point is that human resources are the resources to begin with. The context today was, as the knowledge workforce era developed from the industrial age mindset, is that no, humans are not resources in a conventional sense. I mean, they are capital instead. They have to be used as capital, which is there, which is pricey, which is important. And therefore, our whole perspective around how we view at people element in the organization and their contribution, rather than their mere presence in the organizational construct, is more important. Satisfaction was something which was primarily related to measuring their hygiene, their safety, their lower level needs of the people element in the organization, regarding their maybe compensation, maybe their good canteen food ultimately was one of the important components. In the context of employee engagement, we have moved to higher order things of their human core of love, their belongingness to the organization, their esteem, their self-actualization context in which they can see themselves developing and contributing to meaning and purpose of the organization. So that is the context in which people view the things. So that's important, that from an industrial age mindset, when we have knowledge workforce, when we have people who are intelligent, who can apply their mind, they can contribute with their heart, body, mind, and soul together, we have to look at humans as complete. They are not just contributing their labor element, actually. They are also contributing the intellect, they are contributing to with their emotions, they are contributing with the spiritual well-being, in fact, as well as the physical presence. So that is the larger context in which employee engagement actually holds good. But
yeah, so
a very important element of differentiation, that there is an element of motivation when you talked about employee satisfaction, that people would come, they'll have a good office environment, they'll have good canteen food, they'll have good compensation, they'll have good concepts of promotions and feel happy about it. But then that was something which was at level A.
Hmm.
Now it was at the lower end of the pyramid of Maslow, basically. Now when things progressed, uh, and as they were progressing, there were a lot of tools developed to motivate employees through using means which were like some salary increase, some promotions. In fact, a mixture of carrot and stick. That was the disciplined way of industrial context and mindset. But people became more, available to, they became more conscious of it, their contribution. The whole context changed from motivation to inspiration, from being managed from outside to be managed within. So that is the context which has changed from motivation to inspiration of the employees being addressed. So when you talk about employee engagement, we are talking about that inspiration quotient. Their engagement quotient is basically the inspiration in them, which stays from within rather than from without. It does not require an external prop. Like we were looking at people when we were looking in the context of employee satisfaction, which means you increase the level of well-being in terms of their safety, their hygiene, and they feel better. Now the point is that that is taken for granted. And that was taken for granted, of course. We'll discuss later how this COVID has changed the context. So therefore, motivation to inspiration. In the earlier industrial age context and now the knowledge workforce, there's another change that has taken place. Our treatment of people, when we were given SOPs, now, for example, in industrial mindset, we're supposed to be given standard operating processes.
Yes.
Just follow what you are told to do. So that was, we created good managers and we gave them all the tools of, management like Six Sigma, Lean Sigma, where exactitudes were important, where qualitatively you were getting it right first time. So that was a management revolution. So employee satisfaction led to doing things the right way. But now the context of a knowledge workforce era, when we talk of engagement, we are also talking of the right things to be done by people, in fact, and therefore from management of systematic processes to lending of perspective as a leader with a wider perspective of systemically treating the same things. Systemically means a lot of, linkages, forward, backward. So you're applying yourself more holistically. You are attuned to your work, your level of contribution in a larger holistic context. So it's more meaningful, lending purpose of the whole organization being fulfilled much better. So it's not just a change of nomenclature. It's the whole context which is now recognized that human beings come with their entirety, with their whole persona, which involves not only the physical, but also the emotional, intellectual, the spiritual, and the physical dimensions. And with being engaged, if they're engaged truly, in the sense that there's a higher quotient of engagement, it automatically translates into their discretionary efforts being more, which means that they and walk an extra mile to do something that they're not necessarily required to do. But because of their engagement, because of this leadership thing, their inspiration, their whole context of being organically linked to the purpose of the organization, they are willing to contribute much more than what they are just legitimately, legally supposed to be doing. Now, that is the basic difference between the context where we talked about employee satisfaction earlier, and we have now moved to the context of engagement, the holistic, contribution from the part of the people. They have moved out from what I would say a narrow confines of selfish, egocentric approach to a larger, holistic, ecocentric, larger context of concern of others being included. So it was all talk about, therefore, larger context of participation and inclusion makes it relevant for the context of employee engagement to be understood much better.
So if I can just put it in a nutshell, earlier it was the organization's responsibility to make sure that the employee is happy and satisfied. Now with the engagement thing, it's also the employee's participation in his own satisfaction and well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's like a disposition to what he or she is in the organization. It's actually a mutual. It's a two-way process, in fact, because the organization creates that context of well-being, which is therefore that lower end of the hierarchy. But nevertheless, that's important because an army even marches on his stomach. So the hygiene has to be met. It will be too utopian to say that people just come there to self-sacrifice. Well, there is an element of a kind of an enlightened self-interest being pursued, that's okay. But there is some bit of selflessness which can come only once these basic hygiene factors are kind of, addressed. So it remains to be both ways. Organizations will continue to look at the well-being aspect of it, involvement, participation, making their contribution more meaningful, their kind of, a contribution being behaviorally as well as, from the point of view of processes better recognized, so that their esteem grows up. They work in fact, and while they work in fact, they also contribute to the purpose and meaning of the organization as well as self-growth. So it's actually a mutually beneficial context in which we involve people, where we in fact make their psychological disposition to be available to the organization in a much better way, in a healthier context rather.
Yeah. So with that, I wanted to ask Kavita, how has COVID-19 crisis and its aftermath changed the context of employee engagement as a tool to get the best out of each individual? Actually, if we see, we have gone back to catering first to the hygiene factors, like you got to wear a mask, wash your hand, social distancing, before we even talk about issues of engagement.
Right. Yeah, I think this is a great question, Robin, and very important to talk about at this point in time, because as you said, and as Rajiv was saying, we have, for some time now, we have been understanding employee engagement as, as Rajiv was saying, bringing out the psychological disposition of the individual to contribute in the best possible way. Now, in a crisis, what has happened is that this psychological disposition itself has been affected by a number of factors at the lower level of our needs. So while we were at some point in time before this, we were all okay with this fact that our safety needs were being met. We did not have concerns about the just basic things like the commute to work, or even simple things like, is the door handle safe to open when I walk into the office, right?
Yeah.
So those are things which were absolutely taken for granted, and therefore people were also concerned with, are my higher order needs being met? Are my needs around self-esteem, around having a community, so feeling belonging to a community at work, and then my needs around my own personal growth and learning, so my self-actualization. So how are all those higher order needs going to be met, right? That was where people were prior to this crisis. And now suddenly it's for everybody. What is also interesting is that this crisis has leveled the playing field for everybody in the organization, right? It is not about, so because of this, the person who is at the lowest rung of the organization is as concerned about safety and security as it is for, the leadership of the organization. Because if you are walking into an office, you need that safety and you need that security, that this office is well sanitized, we are in a safe environment. So it has, in a sense, leveled all these differences among people in the organization at different levels, right? Now, what will employee engagement therefore involve? I think it involves now recognizing very importantly that we will have to, first of all, allay the fears of people and cater to their most important psychological, the most basic physiological need for safety and security first. And at the same time, we have to, across the spectrum, we have to then also align people to a sense of values and purpose of the organization. Because now our engagement spans this entire spectrum of needs. We don't have, earlier where we had to go from level 3 to level 5 for engagement, now we have to take care of from level 1 to level 5. So that's the breadth of, actions which are needed to make people feel engaged in this crisis and post the crisis as well. And that's the level at which people and leaders in the organization have to be thinking about what it means for engagement.
Mm-hmm. So there's this, there's Vivek Kumar who's saying an employee may be satisfied coming to office in time and leaving in time, but not much concern for the contribution of the organization. And Dheeraj is saying fear factor seems to be playing on everyone's mind, which is true. Nowadays, there is this fear factor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that's very relevant, because what's important is that this is being realistic. Fears are there, but fears are on both the sides. What has happened is that because of this crisis, particularly, the safety needs are become absolutely important, and that's the risk that we all run right now, because the lockdown, all that it has done, it has given us an opportunity to be better prepared now to face the crisis further. But the COVID fear is not gone. I mean, it's the reason it still exists there, and it will cause us problems, which anyways it will. To answer Vivek's question, basically, the very relevant one, because it's the time now to test both ends, the people as well as the organization. So we have to both reflect, basically, that, well, it's something that the organizations have not created, and it's something that has not happened because of people. So now a lot of mutual respect for each other's, in fact, contribution, the very fact that they stay engaged, the very fact that they kind of, stand committed. Because of the facts that, just this COVID has happened, nothing much has changed, except that, yes, it's a testing time for us, in fact. So we have to reinforce whatever those cords or organic linkages existed prior to COVID. We have to reinforce them, continue reinforcing them, create new avenues, discover better ways of engaging people, basically allaying their fears and then helping them contribute. And also the organization to give the kind of, impression that, well, all's not bad with the context. In fact, we are still there for you and we continue. It's only that this short span of time, we have to do a lot of things simultaneously. One is meet the impact of the lockdown, which the organization will have to now get back, and there'll be a cost, there'll be a time, there'll be a frame of reference, there'll be processes which have to be evolved. And also the impact, the knock-on impact of the economy has been bad because of the slowdown and because of the lockdown. So the point is that everybody now will have to be realistic. You just can't be demanding. The point is that you have to understand the context in which, how you can do your bit, in fact, and let the others do their bit in a larger context of togetherness. I think that will be a much better way of looking at, rather than looking at one side that I'm happy to come, in fact, and just have 2 punches and have one lunch, which is from homemade, in fact, food, and I have brought in with myself and just go back. It's not like that. Things are not going to change. We have to do something together to make, in fact, our workplace a lot better than what it existed. So this going back to scale of pre-COVID days would be an attempt which has to be done together, which has to be done by people being involved, rather than, looking at things separately from my point of view alone. So I think we have to have a much better holistic perspective, looking at all the 360 degrees of vision available to us, in fact, and therefore that's the only way to look at it.
So in this whole scenario, can managers have career development conversations with their team members? And if yes, what would be the focus of those conversations? Kavita, would you like to answer that?
Sure. So career development at this point in time is perhaps, approached not through the lens of perhaps, directly career development, but through the lens of aligning people to the purpose, to the values. And as we've been talking about, and as Rajiv also said, about, how is it that people can, get psychologically disposed towards contributing the best effort that they can at this point in time. So in normal circumstances, what would career development conversations involve? They would involve understanding the aspirations of the individual, of the person on the other, the manager, understanding the person's aspirations, understanding where the person is in terms of, where is the person's current capability level, and then reviewing and providing feedback around what needs to be done to bridge that gap and to move forward towards their aspirations. Now, at this point in time, because we are not talking about, it's an unseeable future for most of us. So managers are in no better position than perhaps the rest of the people in the organization, right? So it is happening at all levels that the future is very volatile, and we don't know what to expect. So it's not going to be a classic career development conversation, but what needs to be done is this continuous, inspiration and actions towards engagement, which will, in a sense, both contribute to career development over a longer period of time for the individual, and it will allow the individual to contribute to the organization's development. So I love the idea what you brought out right now, Rajiv, that it is a very two-way, partnership now. So where earlier there was always this feeling that the organization needs to do these things for me to be engaged. And on the other side, the organization expects that, individual, why doesn't the individual put in these extra efforts, right? So there was always this othering of on both sides. This is the other side and that's the other side, right? But now it has brought it. We are in a place where career development will happen if we look at people with empathy. We look at people with trust, and people will also then feel as if they will want to continue with the organization, contribute as effectively as they want, as they can, as if the organization is going to take care of them in these times. So career development conversations will be much shorter. They will not be in the nature of the typical, career development conversation as we understand it, but they will have to be continuous. It will have to be individual development. It will have to be, all our development. It will have to be organization and individual development, replacing the whole, career development piece by itself.
So,
I think we are all on the same side, the employers as well as the employees.
Yeah.
On the same side of managing the crisis to begin with, and with resilience coming out with going back to where we were actually, and then start progressing through reimagination and through reforming our ways in which we had a perspective around. So we change the whole context of development, in fact, as we go ahead in future.
Rajiv sir, this is Dheeraj this side.
Yeah, Dheeraj.
Sir, I have few questions. In fact, I have messaged on the chat as well. To start with, you used to say this is the VUCA world now. Absolutely, it defines today's world defines VUCA.
Yeah, that's true.
So, sir, there are a few things. One is the uncertainty, which has brought in the fear in the minds of the people. And added to that, sir, most of the companies where they have gone wrong, which I personally believe, is that they have gone for cost optimization, which is cost and benefits, compensation and benefits taking a hit. So in such a scenario, when there is high level of uncertainty, fear of the pandemic, and no sooner, as we know, the news is coming, the vaccine being available in the market. So a lot of things are available. So in this scenario, how do you see employee engagement actually taking place on the ground?
See, it's counterintuitive basically, because the organizations had been going wrong even earlier as far as optimization of cost was concerned, because in the name of cost rationalization and optimization, it all meant that reduce the number of people. Now the point is that, well, that is an element. People element cost is a major component in the fixed cost of the organization. And there's no gainsaying that. It's almost about, in case of knowledge industry, almost to the tune of 80 to 85% of the cost. And even in the service industry, it's around about 10 to 12, 15% of the cost of the fixed cost of your organization, or maybe even more. So that context still remains the same. But the mindset now will have to change, because this is a crisis. This is one of those, what we call black swan events, which was never known, in fact, when it will occur, how will it occur. The possibility was always there. So reducing cost, firstly, at any cost is not the right solution. You have to optimize the cost, in fact, in the real sense. So therefore, the people cost will also have to be considered accordingly. And that it's, if there are better ways of managing your cost, the idea is that you get your cash currently. So the disposable cash is a challenge, yes. So to sort it out, your receivables, your inventory management, your variable cost management, there are other ways of managing costs and making the processes more efficient, rather than just talking about increasing, decreasing the employee level cost and kind of retrenchment. But then that is going to happen because of a lot of other things that were happening earlier. So now is the time, as I said, and Kavita beautifully put, that it's time to reconcile all this, that was my side and your side. We have to take a more non-partisan view. We have to be involved in solving this whole crisis, rather than saying that who's right and who's wrong, and I can do it at your cost. We can't. Yes. We have to manage this thing together. So engagement itself is never going to be a wrong issue to be pursued. Engagement will always there, and organizations exist only with engagement of people. The point is, how do we manage it is a different issue. If we are progressive, if we are forward-looking, and if we want to ensure a future post-COVID, which is good and beneficial for the industry, for the business, for the customers, for all the stakeholders, we have to be a little cautious in our approach. It's not that, the golden rule is that you just cut costs in terms of remove people and you suddenly come back to normal. No, it will not come. There are many cases where by reducing people indiscriminately, you'll be ending up creating an anorexia in an organization, so that your whole propensity to grow will be stifled. So I think we have to use wisdom somewhere in kind of doing what is right, rather than preconceived notions being followed about what was conventionally considered to be right approach. I think that's where we need to kind of, take a holistic view and see to it that in the process, there'll be a lot of new discoveries. There'll be a lot of, kind of redesigning of things, processes, systems, and taking the decisions in the right spirit, and ultimately then delivering on the right value to both the customers as well as internal employees and all stakeholders taken together. I think that's the view we have to kind of, there are no right or wrong answers, but there's always a better way to improve upon the way we have been looking at the diabolically, antagonistic interest of employees and employers. It's not there. In terms of engagement, it never was, because we have to collectively grow, we have to collectively withstand this crisis and come out of it, in fact, in a more resilient and in a more resilient, in fact, in a more robust manner, that we don't sacrifice this robustness and kind of, our resilience in the process. I hope it answers the question.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
So with that, one of the questions that I have, that for the past 2.5 months, and some companies more than that, have been working in an online environment. Now, how do you monitor employee engagement or employee satisfaction or employee effectiveness or employee productivity? Kavita or Rajiv, any of you can answer. How will somebody monitor in this online environment?
Kavita, can I just put in a word?
Yes.
What Robin, is a very, very, and I think you put it very correctly, that this whole changeover has taken place, and therefore it actually now goes back to our basic conception, our basic first principles of management. That we can manage people in which ways? Those were the ways in which we thought that by monitoring them, controlling them, by kind of breathing down the neck, we can kind of manage their performance better. Now that context was anyways changing in the kind of the context of the knowledge workforce arena, where people were considered more responsible, self-management principles were being put in place, more participative, in fact decentralized and distributed nature of responsibility was being accomplished, particularly in the knowledge-based industries. Now, you can manage people only by monitoring them closely is one issue, but you have to create those, or actually believe in principles of self-management. So you have actually, the right context would be that individuals from their end will have to see that, well, the kind of God exists within. So they should still have that integrity enough to do the right things when nobody is watching them. The point is that it's a different issue that we get watched also when we log in, in fact, and our work goes on, and we have to be available. I mean, you can't be bluffing it all the time, because there are mechanisms of technology which can, even if people do that, they'll obviously not escape this being noticed. So the point is that as employers, as employees, we have to understand that this whole context of remote, it's not remote working actually, because remote means there are few people who are required to be at the core and others remain at the remote or the peripheral state of the organization. It's like more, as somebody rightly said, it's more better called distributed responsibility. So everybody will have to do his or her own role from wherever. It's like working from not only home, working from all over. That is the context which will, the wider sense, will be the one that is going to be the real context of work reinforcements or work redesign in the future. So here, more of working ethics around the fact that, well, I be judged by my outcome. That means the product, what I do, would therefore then be the one which will judge me, rather than when I do it, how do I do it, which time of the day I choose to do, because there'll be a lot of distributed responsibilities that one has to cater to. So that sense of balance, as long as the work gets done, I think that kind of spirit will have to be followed here when there's a remote working, in fact, environment. When your monitoring principles will have to change. You need not monitor them on everything they do, how they do. rather than you have to be kind of, self-belief of individuals, and also organizations will have to redesign their processes. Their technological platform will have to be reworked to kind of, manage things very differently than the ones we were used to, in fact, when we were all together at one single workplace. There are advantages, but there were distinct disadvantages because people had to travel, people had to kind of, waste a lot of time. They have to comply to a particular time frame within which they have to work. Now they have the freedom to use their time the way they wish to. There'll be more of, work-life balance kind of situation, much better managed. And therefore, this kind of reality has developed. An example, in fact, I'll give you that comes to my mind, that in context of Buddhist economics, they have an answer to this issue.
Buddhist economics.
Buddhist economics, yes, I think, and because we live in a capitalist way of mode of economics, where capitalist liberal economics, where it's like, you're working together, you're working with a code of discipline, and you come to work, in fact, and then go back home. When you come back, you do it at the cost of your leisure, and when you go back, you are. Now there's a problem in this kind of context, that we are following. We consider that work is at one end of the spectrum and leisure is at the other end of the spectrum. So leisure is where the employee is, work is where the employer is. The employer's end, it will mean 100% work, 0% leisure, and probably 0% salary. That's one end of the spectrum of the employer. At the level of the employee, it will mean 100% leisure when you stay home, 0%, 100% salary also, and 100% leisure and 0% work. Now, from here, when we start, so that means there is an element of sacrifice in our way we look at the whole context of work, which means work is at the cost of your leisure, which is a very wrong notion. So what the Buddhist way of understanding this is that, and this is what they, even in terms of the Japanese context of ikigai, when they say that you do what you love and you kind of, society is having a need for this work and it also pays to you. You get your ikigai right. So once you kind of, fuse your work and leisure together, that means you do what you love and love what you do. That kind of work redesign when people are, and therefore this remote working will have to kind of, start a context in which you redesign the work. You have to create small pieces of work in a very different way. As they say, the gig economy, you'll have to create gigs, small pieces of work, and then kind of, put the whole puzzle together. So a lot of redesigning will have to go so that your work everybody does is the work that he or she loves. And then while working, we will not be saying that we are doing it at the cost of leisure. We will in fact have a kind of a 7-day weekend while working. So that will be the new ways, in fact, in which we can redesign work and have people being occupied with work and leisure together. So that what I love doing, I don't feel that it's to the cost of my leisure. And the employers also don't mind, because the point is that it's leading to the 100% engagement and 110% of their contribution. So I think that is the way, in fact, we have to redesign our very concepts of thinking about work. Things have changed. A lot is going to change even more. So we have to devise new ways of working. We can't be burdened by the past rules, regulations, processes. We have to no longer, we have to redesign our work and scope and context and concepts as we move forward, rather than being burdened by the old ways of looking at work and leisure as something which I have to fight for. The point is that if you have your ikigai together, you kind of, fuse your work and leisure. You feel that, yes, I'm doing something that I like, and work is redesigned, managed to your capability in a gig economy context, which is going to develop. Gig means that, we'll be all doing things necessarily for 10 organizations at the same time and doing it in bits and pieces and getting paid for whatever I do. So I think the whole context of work, workforce and workplace will be getting redesigned in this manner, what I feel. I mean, you can't predict how exactly it's going to happen, but broad kind of, there are factors which show that, projections that, well, this is the broad way in which this context is going to be reset, redesigned, reimagined, and kind of, readjusted to the new realities of time.
So Rajiv, one of the points you made, and which was very loud and clear, is that the person who's working from home or wherever else, and not from office, because there is no monitoring there, the ownership lies with that person completely.
Yes.
And that person has to be independently responsible for his or her work.
It's basically, Robin, that's the right way, because predominantly, yes, I'll be responsible for what I do. Or if I don't do what I have to do, then there'll be room to kind of, not of escape. You will get caught also. So the point is that we have to be very responsible at what we do and what we expect also from the employer's end. You have to be cognizant of the other's, situation and context. That you can't have preconceived notions that, well, this has to be done. You have to understand, you have to have trust, you have to have a bonding. In fact, if you have to work together as a contribution rather than, looking at each other's faults. So,
See, there was a time I worked with this IT company where it was easier because people were given that they have to do certain lines of code and it has to be complete. Whether you're working from home or from office, that segment has to be complete within that day, or those number of segments have to be complete. So it was a lot more easier. I think that's what is with IT guys, that this job has to be complete, it has to go, it has to go.
Correct. So that still remains right. That's the right way to look at it, because now more and more industries will have to do things which IT guys were doing anyways. It's not that, there are new rules, but then you have to start conforming to the rules which are not more contextual and relevant to all of us.
And Kavita, you were saying something.
A point about, Robin, your question around monitoring, right?
Yes.
So an analogy came up for me while we were speaking about this, that, in the previous non-knowledge era, and perhaps all of us are also products of that kind of an education system, right? Now, monitoring of learning was done through detailed and comprehensive exams, right? So exam matlab, it meant that you have to fill up pages with lots and lots of answers, and that was the test of whether you had absorbed and you had learned, right?
Yes.
Now, whether or not that, and there were ways to get around it as well, right? We knew how to write a lot without necessarily having absorbed that. So exam was it's symbolic of that monitoring, right?
Yes.
And similarly in organizations, monitoring itself became another kind of process in itself that had become something very large. And whether or not now, when we're talking about engagement in a sort of a place where we are right now in these times, people are working from home. You don't have that kind of ability to micromanage, monitor continuously. So look at this analogy of an exam. So what is happening now? People are moving away from these detailed exams to multiple choice questions, because in that also you have to apply your learning, and really whether you've understood something or not really gets reflected in when you're answering those smaller, shorter questions. So what I want to say is that monitoring in these times has to be thought of very differently. It cannot be an exercise in itself. It has to be tied to what is it. So managers have to really think about what do I want to measure, and how can I measure it in the simplest possible way. It's not as if we don't need those measures. We all need those markers. We want, so as much as we want, we would certainly be, in us moving towards a state where we take responsibility for ourselves, but it also helps for us to have these, markers on the way. And if the managers can simplify and make these very sharp, very focused, and what are you trying to measure becomes a question which managers have to answer for themselves very strongly, and also shift the paradigm from, monitoring for its own sake to trust, and therefore, what do I need to measure?
Right. And why be always, be carried over with the context that if you can't measure, don't measure, because measurement is not an end in itself. Measurement is achieve something. And in fact, in this context, Robin, I'm reminded of a saying from Lawrence Jacks.
Yeah.
We were discussing the other day. The master, it says like this: the master in the art of living makes little distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his education and his recreation, his love and his religion. He hardly knows which is which. He pursues his vision of excellence at whatever he does, leaving others to decide whether he is working or playing. To him, he is always doing both. Now, I think that's the way in which mutual trust and mutual benefit will actually bound you together, which means that if you are ultimately, through an outcome, you are doing what you anyways had to do. Why go through this process of monitoring? Why be hankering after a means rather than the ends of what you wanted to achieve? And if you achieve them more holistically, That's probably the right way to look
Yeah, that will ask for a whole lot of ownership from the side of the employees.
at it. Absolutely.
See,
Yeah, Rajiv sir. Yeah, this is Sanjay Thakur here. I believe the three C's which we spoke a long back of, the care, concern, and the compassion. So if these three C's are in place, in the COVID times also, I think probably we can have the better engagement of the employees.
Yeah, but Sanjay, I think care, concern, and compassion will now have to be both ways. It's not only that organization would be caring and having concern and compassion for people, but people also themselves will have to have care, concern, and compassion equally for the collective cause. So I think it's more now a distributed responsibility rather than being a one-sided affair of being exploited by the organization. The employees, because in case they don't do it, the employees in the future, because of technological, compulsions and roboticization of whatever is planned and predictable, the point is that you will have the risk of from being exploited today to the risk of becoming irrelevant tomorrow if you don't do it. So if we want to remain as employees relevant, we have to upgrade our skills and everything, and also our disposition to the management, that care, concern, and compassion to the management problem, their responsibilities, their limitations. We can't just be expecting things on a one-sided basis. That probably is a realization that has come to us all together today.
Right, sir.
So with that, we can't leave the customer behind. Everything that we are doing, manufacturing, is for the end customer. So Kavita, I just wanted to ask you, now this whole employee engagement, or going forward, it's going to be called employee experience. How's that going to impact the customer in an online workspace? Because for a long time, it looks like we'll be working from home. So how's the customer going to be impacted?
Yeah. So I think, again, we need to go back to this fundamental, way in which we have been so far we've been looking at all these sets of people as very distinct entities, right? And what we've been discovering and speaking about in this conversation is also that if we start looking at all of them as not as separate groups of people with different kinds of needs, but look at the interdependence among the three large entities that we're talking about: the organization, the employees, and the customers. Eventually there has to be what will actually lead to this engagement is finally an end towards retaining customers and improving your own connection with customers, having greater success with customers by improving the customer experience, right? That is what eventually the efforts of engagement are towards, that we keep our employees engaged so that their experience leads to a fundamentally transformative experience for the customer. So if we are looking at what binds all these three sets of stakeholders together, if we look at that holistically, then this whole problem is not one of looking at one side's needs over the other. Then it becomes a seamless set of actions where we are doing the set of things which will, first of all, engage employees, because engaged employees are likely to go out of their way, go beyond the call of whatever is expected of them. And that will in turn affect the experience of the customers. So that is the way that we are looking at this whole thing. We don't want to look at these three stakeholders as different and competing entities in terms of their needs, but as interdependent. Customers need organizations, organizations need employees, employees also need organizations, right? So that's what we've been saying, that there has to be a realistic understanding that all these entities are, in a sense, combined, and we need each other. And that's where engagement has to be, constructed from that place.
Wonderful. I think this whole context has rebuilt our commitment to interdependence, basically. And that is right, that, we existed not as islands now. It's more that we have an organic linkage. And it always was. The point was that whosoever neglected now would be doing at his or her own peril. The point is that now is it that, it's a matter of existence, because this crisis, unless customers, stakeholders, and why even customers? It's like the social equity of all the stakeholders and the emotional equity of the employees. That's what engagement is all about. Emotional equity and social equity of the larger stakeholders, the societal equity, and that will lead to financial equity of the organization. Because all these three have to stay put together, because If one does it, one cannot do it at the cost of each other. It never was actually, but now probably it has helped us. When we talk about it now, it becomes very obvious that, oh my God, this is exactly the way out, because this interdependence is what is going to keep us together. Because even while fighting through the kind of, the prognostications of the COVID itself, for maybe a year or two to come through, and managing the economic meltdown, which will necessarily follow as the economic knockdown impact will have to be felt. So we have to kind of, build our relationships now afresh. If not, we had done it earlier. At least now we have the perspective clear on very different anchors of our disposition. We have to redefine the very anchors which held us together. And now more of interdependence, more of holistic consideration, more of linkages. These have to be established if they're not. And if they were there, these have to be reinforced further to kind of, bring in greater commitment from all the ends. The equity of emotional equity of the employees, the social equity of the larger society, and this will lead to financial equity, and all will feed on to each other. This will be mutually beneficial relationships, or symbiotic relationship, as we say, in the right context.
Yeah, so you're talking about relationships and employee engagement is all about that. Now, one of the things that I have seen, observed, and you also may have observed, Kavita and Rajiv both, and others also who are on the call, that many times managers take their teams out for an outbound training. Yeah, and it happens just before the employee engagement survey. A week before or 15 days before the employee engagement survey, the team is taken out for probably 2 days or 3 days, and at least for one night. So they are staying over for one night at least. In the evening, there is daru, booze, there is music, and there is typically bonfire.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Sometimes they may have some event that you do a fashion show or do a dance or whatever. And I've seen how people also look forward to it, and managers think that's the way they can improve their employee engagement scores. Now, what is your take on that? Because to me, it sounds very inauthentic.
Yeah, if that was the way it was ever unauthentic, and now all the more, because that inauthenticity is very apparent today. But Robin, there's a context also. Why? Because employee engagement was never taken seriously. It was taken as something that you can just put on a tag, that that's a best employer, tag.
Yes.
That it's a great place to work tag, just by kind of, following a process. Now, engagement is not an outcome of a process. It can be measured through a process. That's fine. But now in the changed context where these kind of, jamborees or getting together, outbounds will not be possible for quite some time to come. The real issue will have to be measured, not that, you do something to get a better outcome. So you're managing the results of the engagement survey that would possibly be conducted, say, 8 to 10 days later, and people feel good about the management. It's not what you feel. And therefore, there is also a change. In fact, and I've been talking to a lot of consultants at Mercer, Hewitt, and so on and so forth. And what now we are trying to evolve is a context of not perception-based surveys. Because what happens, the problem was with the surveys themselves, the kind of questions they would ask. Even earlier, they would ask about employee satisfaction. Are you happy with your salary? Now, can you imagine anybody would be happy with his or her salary? That's the question in absurdity. Now the point, are you promoted on time? Are you given that? That was employee satisfaction. When it moved to employee engagement, the set of questions were themselves that, are you happy to come every Monday morning? Now, if you ask these questions, they are at times, because of the deformities that we've discussed earlier, that work and leisure and those kind of context of work-life balance not being there, Friday evenings, Monday mornings. I mean, why should they make a difference if the context of a work culture is created where people do what they want to do? So now the good thing is that to get you out of this, to extricate yourself from this morass of, conducting these sham surveys of engagement, the point is that we're moving from perception-based surveys to evidence-based surveys. Now, I think if that is the kind of surveys being evolved, that, you are not judged by what you think you are about, but then it has to be evidence-based. There has to be evidence that, well, this much of contribution has led to this much of productivity increase. So cost, productivity, and compliance, therefore, would be the three criteria around which the progress of engagement would be gathered. If And there have been kind of, a lot of studies which have shown that evidence-based surveys will probably set this right. So you cannot manage or manipulate employees' perceptions. And you can probably in the earlier context, but now it's not relevant. Because what will be relevant ultimately, आप कितनी भी दारू पिला दें उनको, वो जब ऑडिटर आएगा आपकी एविडेंस कलेक्ट करने, तो वो एविडेंस वर्क पे देखेगा कि how much of commodity, how much of equity, that emotional equity is available, how much of cooperation is seen between people, and how much of this thing at the workplace is contributing towards better increased output and productivity of the company. So I think as we learn our lessons, in fact, people just find their ways to come out of any process or structure that is created. Human ingenuity is there all the time, and you can break through any rule, law, and regulation. But I think now the important thing is that yes, there are ways now evidence-based would be able to do away with this daru-based manipulated, issues.
I want to hear what Kavita has to say on this.
No, I heartily agree with whatever Rajiv has said, and I would just like to perhaps share a couple of examples in this, right? That when we're talking about and as you said, see, the point about measuring these engagement surveys are more about perception. And for organizations which are genuinely engaging people and where people genuinely feel engaged, most often they don't even participate in these kinds of surveys. Right? They are not the organizations which want that badge, because for them the evidence is as Rajiv was saying, it is more about looking at what is the proof. What's the proof in terms of results, in terms of productivity, cost, compliance. Those are the things where it actually shows up.
Yes.
And for instance, one of the organizations which I work with is a financial services. They're in the area of financial inclusion. So what they do is to help people make, the people who do not have access to banking, make cash transfers to their families back in the rural areas. Now, this is such a strong purpose and value system in the organization that in a crisis like this, they have been able to actually engage their employees far more, because they have, for instance, the need to get migrant workers, for them to be able to remit money back to places where it's needed. So the people are actually coming together so strongly around the purpose, the ways in which their work will actually contribute to society as such. So I'm saying that it's about the values, it's about the purpose. It's not only about this perception management, but if you are continuously engaging people around things which matter to them, it doesn't have to always be a social goal. It doesn't mean that everybody is out to serve society. But in some way or the other, if you are engaging people around what matters to them, that is going to increase their energy and feel that their emotions are being understood. And that's what is at the heart of this engagement. So it's about the energy, it's about the emotions, which will lead to that continuous engagement. And when there is it's almost like, why do we need to measure this outcome of engagement in the form of a survey? That's a lot of it is mostly the optics of it, because it's about companies which make these surveys for them, right? It's a lot to do for it benefits them. But if you are continuously engaging employees, look at engagement as a continuous verb and as a process, not as this outcome and as a noun. That engagement survey kar diya or engagement ke ye results nikle, then we are in the right place. We don't need these and fine, if you have some of these parties, some of these things, those are also some ways in which people do feel as if they're having a good time, yes, but doing that to, in a sense, influence engagement survey participation, that is certainly not the right way. And I don't think that is going to work also much in the future if people are actually looking at working in knowledge-based work, the kind of future that we are talking about.
Yeah, that will go totally out of the window if it's going to be online for quite some time to come.
It will be seen through Robin.
Yeah.
We have to address the drivers of engagement.
That's right.
Engagement are basically three. One is the overall organizational policies, structures, and processes. The second most important is the immediate superior of the person. And he or she, that relationship can be monitored very clearly. And then the nature of work that an employee does. These are the three anchors of engagement. Now, if you address these rather than as an evidence, rather than any perception-based survey on this, So I think that whole context of what you call the work experience engagement survey, it will be like a combination of all of that based on evidence. That is going to get you the right picture, because if the nature of work is engaging enough, it kind of, gets to me, closer to my ikigai or whatever I support as my love for work. It will be more contributed if my boss and he or she understands my relationships and that relationship bonds are strong, and the organization values allow for this freedom of using my disposition to fail. There's a whole lot of culture around engagement, because when people are more engaged and driven to delivering, then they have more kind of an innovative. They'll fail, but your failures have accommodated, and it has to be like participative and inclusiveness as a part of the culture. So all these things have to be simultaneously held together and monitored, rather than just measuring it around somebody's perception at one particular point of time when he's half drunk, from out of the evening that he spent. So I think there are ways to do things also, in fact, if we have to really get to the point.
Yeah, and now coming to what's happening nowadays with this COVID-19 and the changes that we are seeing, I was reading this Nassim Nicholas Taleb quote where he says, anti-fragility is beyond resilience or robustness. The resilient resists shocks and stays the same. The anti-fragile gets better. So from that context, will it now be reset, relearn, and rejuvenate going forward?
Yeah. That's a very profound statement of Taleb. And remember, Taleb talked about the role of randomness and the black swan events before he wrote about anti-fragility.
Yes.
Now he's talking about anti-fragility in the sense that, it's like a rubber ball. The harder you hit it on the ground, the higher it will go. Unlike, a glass which can break. So there's a glass which breaks, so it is fragile. Now, people say that I am resilient and robust because I'm able to absorb the shock.
Yes.
But he talks about the third state. If this, this random events or these crises are handled better with more of imagination, and they are kind of, addressed in the right way, understanding, and then kind of, conceptualizing, enunciating, and then creating and executing plan based on real anchors and related to ground, I think we can develop in the organization or any person as an individual, that kind of a thing which we call anti-fragility. You can emerge even stronger. So the context is very true, because this COVID crisis, many of us have said, and I firmly believe, at least for one, very sure that, we'll emerge stronger. And that's been the story of human civilization. Whenever they've been pushed, like the Y2K bug experience is not too far into history. It was in 2000. And people, once they overcome there, in fact, what happened was an overkill of technology. You were fighting for survival of technology in 2000, and 2001 and 2, you just see this whole overkill of technology comes up, where by 2007, the start of the fourth industrial revolution is speeded up, where it's all about convergence. So now this is anti-fragility. That means there was a crisis and you come out. Now what you have to do in this, that there's a method which Taleb also talks about, I remember, that, he says that you have to firstly resolve the current crisis. Now, for example, we see it in the context of COVID. Now we have to address the immediate issues. We have to manage the issues of workforce, the customers. We have to even talk about the suppliers, the supply chain, the entire, business partner or range of business partners. So that is, immediately we have to address this cause and with resilience, which would mean that takes down necessarily, realistically, the impact of the shutdown and the lockdown, and the impact of the knockdown, impact of the economy. And through a discovery process, design now systems which can not only fail this, but they'll be fail-proof to a second crisis that comes later. So, and then take those decisions in a more holistic, integrated manner, and then deliver. So if we use this whole methodology around resolving the current crisis with adequate amount of resilience, which is important, and then return to that scale, which it was, and from there reimagine the new configurations. How is it going to change? How is it impacted? And have a very realistic and sincere assessment of the situation, the ground situation. Don't deceive yourself with certain, your dreamy situations about what your perception looks like. Be very concrete, in fact, and then reform or change your methodologies, reimagine, restructure, redesign, and be open to this change rather than, being governed by preconceived notions. Because if those notions which were there in the past were right, then they would have probably not led to this crisis.
Yes.
So we have to have a realistic assessment, reassessment of how and what we should do, and kind of, do it with the full realization, with full sense of responsibility, honesty, integrity, sincerity. That alone will help us have an integrated view of what we call the right way to do things, rather than just the right things to be done. I mean, right way of doing the right things. And that is where we combine your management, your leadership. Don't be too attached to those kind of things which your ego. So you move from that egocentric approach, as I said, narrow, selfish confines of, your views, to now the larger, context of ecocentric horizons of relating yourself to the larger context of what is human well-being, what is, customers, needs, and the organizational sustenance needs of financial equity all together. So we don't see each other as enemies, but as friends who have to cooperate together and create what is called a common destiny the way we want. So I think anti-fragility is going to be one aspect where each of us individually learn how we be anti-fragile, don't succumb only to the crisis, but try to learn the lessons and don't repeat those same mistakes again. That's exactly what I say, that, how you manage failures. So crisis is a kind of a failure, but then we have not failed. As long as we put in our efforts together in an integrated, cooperative, interdependent ways of finding new ways, rather than being kind of, lost into what is right and wrong. Right and wrong is good. You have to do the right things in the right way. But the point is more important, that how do you move to the next level and improve upon, and rather than getting bogged down by the crisis itself. So I think it's that endearing spirit of humans. And as collectively, we are stronger than each one of us as individually. As long as we are able to necessarily look into this aspect and continue to hone this skill of ours, through finding, solving those complex problems creatively, and using our critical side of strategic, intent and capabilities and capabilities, competence, we can extricate ourselves from out of this morass in a much better way, so that we stand much stronger than we were ever before. So I think there has been a lot of examples of it in all through history. So there's no way that COVID crisis is going to be the last. There'll be many more crises of similar kind or different kinds. As they say, randomness is not going to leave this universe. Because ultimately we know hardly anything about the universe. As it is said, that, we only know about 0.1% of whatever is knowable in the world. So 99.9% is not even within the purview of our knowledge. So 96% being the dark energy, 4% being in the atomic format, out of which 99% is something which is in the interstellar space. So the atomic reality of billions of stars around and our existence in the universe, known universe, is very less. So this is the way, in fact, in which we have to broaden the horizons of our thinking, and through creativity, right part of the brain, create design thinking, parallel thinking processes. We've got to work through this mystery, learn through our heuristics, and redevise our algorithms of life. That is where you change from what is reliable today to what is getting validated tomorrow. And that's the whole knowledge funnel process of design thinking, which is going to help us evolve our solutions for the future in a much, much better way. So I think anti-fragility will be the theme going forward for all of us individuals.
Okay, somebody.
I think Robin, you have to do something about it.
हाँ जी, पीतमपुरा पंजाबी बाग, प्लीज आप म्यूट पे जाइए प्लीज.
Robin, आप करो म्यूट उसको.
या वो कर रहा हूँ लेकिन हो नहीं रहा.
No, I think that's some kind of a person who's not in this meeting.
Okay, must be. A lot of things. See, it's all randomness, right? We talked about. We don't know what will hit us. So this could be one of them. Okay, since we are talking about employee engagement, and we moved from employee satisfaction in the earlier days to employee engagement, and now to employee experience, the third part is coming in employee experience. So, Kavita, I wanted to ask you: will it help the manager if he or she stays in regular communication stays visible, is available, gives feedback in quick sound bites to help the team course correct quickly to improve the employee experience.
Yeah, certainly. I think that, and everybody is understanding that in this crisis, over communication helps. So over communication, not to the point of, and what you communicate, I think is matters more. So frequency is definitely very important, but keep those check-ins with people short, keep them focused on how you can help and create, enabling conditions for people to do whatever they can and whatever they're expected to be doing. So certainly communication, more of it is required right now. And is that communication empathetic? Does it, does it energize the person? That is what the focus of these efforts has to be. That the more you are having these check-ins with your people, is it focused towards making them, creating those conditions which will increase their energy, rather than, communicating to the extent of that it actually saps the energy of the people. So that's where we'll have to, keep taking those calls around how much we communicate with our people.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify, when you say energy, is it like, oh, my manager is calling me, wow, I look forward to this call, or is it like, oh my God, there she goes again?
Right. Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. We have to take that call. For instance, we are all now aware of Zoom fatigue, right? Too many calls in a day, too many, having too many of those conversations. You cannot do that in the same way. So you have to be mindful on a day-to-day basis of what is happening to us, to ourselves, to our people around us, and doing those, finding ways in which, you can have those quick, meters on energy, checking the energy meter of people. So how do we do that? Can we do that through maybe, a chat? So for each individual and for their, group of people with whom they're working, they'll have to evolve those ways of, checking in for each other, keeping their energy focused around. So it's not a one size fits all kind of an approach, right? And that's where and that's perhaps more the exciting part of this also, that you are continuously engaged in thinking of how to keep people engaged, right? That's also another way of looking at it.
Okay, with that, I want to give some opportunity to people who are on the call to ask their questions. So please unmute yourself, ask the question of Rajiv or Kavita. Please go ahead.
Rajiv sir, this is Dheeraj this side.
Yeah.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, Dheeraj.
Yes.
Yeah.
Achha, sir, there was a question in my mind. You spoke about a lot of things, sir, as far as mindfulness is concerned, and many other things. In this short span of time, do we really see that the huge paradigm shift which requires from all the stakeholders happening soon? Do we have this much of time for all of us to change so fast and adapt to the changing environment? Because this is going to take a lot of time. So as an industry, a person from the industry, do we really have this much of time with us?
I get your point. I get your question, Dheeraj. The point is that, there is always so much time for things which are so random as COVID. Now, the point is, who has the time, actually? The point is that if you don't respond in this reaction time, now the point is that there were times when you could have responded and reacted differently. Now is one such crisis to which you all have to collectively and individually respond in reaction time. So it's now a matter of compulsion. It may or may not happen. It is difficult. Who says it's easy? But then very kind of, difficult situation, extraordinary situations require extraordinary endeavor. So I think that's one part of the story, that how many are capable of doing it and what will happen. Those who were not able to, they'll pay the price. So the point is that, yes, it's unfortunate, but the point is that it's always been survival of the fittest. The whole theory of evolution is based on that. So, and that's how we humans learn. And if we have to move ahead, the point is we can't be now kind of, feeling victims. So that is what is important, that now we have to develop the player in ourselves, that, well, if there is a crisis, if it needs faster disposition, then so be it. I can't have the luxury of time for adjusting to those kind of transitions, and that normally a change process takes us to. Yes, it's important. There'll be a lot of maladjustments. There'll be a lot of kind of functioning of the accommodations not being possible for those. They'll be left out. So as I said, if you don't kind of, unlearn or relearn the new ways, the new skills, you will be rendered irrelevant. And that's true. So the point is that this is the time for us to understand the fact that, yes, there's less of time, and the crisis is, these crises do create a situation where a lot of things happens in too short a time. Like the French Revolution happened. Now people, they never had the time to adjust to it. The post-French Revolution society was in chaos. But then chaos was limited, and from there emerged the new France. And that was very strong. And that is how from every crisis, there have been crises of pandemics also of the kind earlier, and just see what happens, in fact, in the cyclone thing. So cyclone is also a pandemic, not that things are going to end. Cyclone happened, and we have to develop that fortitude. We have to develop in ourselves that courage and conviction. There's a method today. There's technology. There is human will to survive, which is going to outdo all these things, as limitations. So we got to become more of players now. I mean, in an organizational context, we may act as professionals, but ultimately we exist as human beings. So I think we can't say, and kind of, under the garb of being an employee, that I'm a victim of certain situations. My employer is not doing this and not that. I mean, what are you doing? Firstly, do what you have to do, and then kind of, see how things can be attracted to you, how you can work around things rather than, all the time seeking help of providence to help you out. It may sound like philosophy today, but then, yes, we all have become philosophers in a sense that, this is the time for us to and kind of, really redefine our purpose of life and existence. This is an existential crisis, no doubt about it. Never known to history ever before that the whole world has closed down, imagine. It's like not a pandemic of even SARS and other kinds of, the events that have happened earlier. But this is there, and this is for real. So I think we'll have to take extraordinary measures. There has never been a precedence to this. So we are lacking precedence here in the sense. We all have to be pioneers.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Dheeraj. Yes, someone else? Your question? Please unmute yourself.
There have been some questions in the chat, Robin.
Yeah, but I can't see those chats right now. If you can see those, you can just pick it up, Kavita, Rajiv, because you can see those chats.
Yeah. How can business leaders make sure that they are not laying the groundwork now for a reckoning of cultural regret when the current crisis passes? Oh, that's a brilliant statement. I think that's a very beautifully scripted version of what the reality today is by Shrestha Vijay. How can business leaders make sure that they are not laying the groundwork now for a reckoning of cultural regret when the current crisis passes? That's true, because we have all to learn to kind of, do the right things, not just the right way. In fact, set up the right examples that we don't regret later that, oh my God, I did not do this, which I should have done. So we should collectively now take a call very strategically, very intelligently, very selectively, that yes, all that needs to be done, we must do.
And I think to add that, what I would also, I probably want to share an example which I have been reading about. If the leadership of the organization and are, taking into account the considerations of various stakeholders, and we've been talking about this throughout this conversation, that it is not about, looking at different entities as having competing needs, but how do we find a solution which works in the best interest and which is also realistic and pragmatic considering these times. Then I think we are all not soothsayers, so we cannot say that, for sure these actions will have no, adverse fallouts or consequences, or will they not be interpreted by some people in the wrong way. But if the intentions are such that they're in the right place, and then they do take into account the needs of various kinds of stakeholders, then it is likely that they will be in the right direction. And of course, so for just to quote an example, there's been a huge difference in the way that perhaps, we've read of how Uber had fired 3,500 of its employees over a Zoom call, a 3-minute Zoom call, and they were fired. And at the same time, we also have heard of how For instance, Swiggy has also had to lay off a large number of people. But the way it was done with far greater, empathy. So people have been given much better, packages to be able to ease their, transition out. They've been assisted with outplacement services. They've been given a whole, and the communication itself from the leaders has been far more empathetic. So that's why, if there is that empathy which we have, which we start with from, start operating from a place of empathy and understanding, then I think the actions will be in the right direction, even if they are not, completely clear at this point in time.
I mean, everybody is doing his or her bit. The point is that we are all on test. That if you have fired it randomly and recklessly, then you will pay the price.
Yes.
That's going to affect your employee value proposition, because now the employees will need that, okay, when I needed you most, you deserted me. So the point is that there's a time of relationship building, and if you do the right things, you will definitely bear the right results. In India, as it is, we go by the management of consequence. So the point is that, it's important for all of us to understand that this crisis also, our response needs to be justifying our stature. We should not let ourselves down. This was testing time for all of us. How much of tenacity, how much of that, capability to being anti-fragile is existing in each one of us. I think we kind of, be very conscious of it, because this is rightly said by Shrestha that, you shouldn't regret later on.
Any other questions you can see that you want to take up in the chat? Because I'm not. There's something.
No, I don't. That's because Dheeraj has asked. There'll be questions and
okay.
More, right? Remarks on it. Beautifully said. I think VP Singh says that I agree that target or end result based monitoring rather than when, how will be the new model of monitoring and engagement and productivity. And Dheeraj say, apart from routine work, the COVID has brought out a lot of guidelines to be followed, which in turn affects the normal working.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, Robin, there's somebody saying that some members were waiting room to join.
There must be. There is something with my net connection, because I'm not able to see. So I didn't want to fiddle with that right now.
Okay, so there are a lot of members who are waiting in the waiting room, so they're not able to join.
Yeah. So one of the things that I need to do is, I think I should do away with this password thing, so people can straight away join in.
Yeah,
I think what happens is I keep getting distracted. I have to keep saying admit, and then that also takes a mic.
Because I've got so many messages saying that they're not able to log in.
Yes. If you just put there in the chat that let them.
The recorded version, yeah. You can put the recorded version on LinkedIn and Facebook.
Yes,
later.
I will do that. Once this call is over, it will definitely be up on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube.
You must not feel the regret.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So my apologies to those who couldn't get in. Please watch the video.
Yeah, I think they will.
Yes, any other question from anyone? You can unmute yourself. Okay, I don't hear anybody asking any question. Anybody putting any question on the chat?
No, I don't think there are coming any. We can.
Okay, good. So since there are no more questions, we can close this conversation. So in closing, Kavita and Rajiv, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to have you both on these live chats on different topics. I don't know what other topic we can take on, but those of you who are participating, you can let us know if there is any other topic you want the two experts to speak on. That would be really lovely. And everyone who's on the call, thank you very much. Really appreciate you being on the call, on a live call on Sunday morning. So thank you very much.
But one thing, Robin, I must say on the expert thing that you said, none of us are experts today.
Especially with the COVID thing, but at least
all relearning.
We are relearning.
So all of us are making conjectures.
Yes, it's all conjectures actually.
The point is that people say that when you don't know what your target is, you hit it on the target, and then wherever it hits, you say that was the target.
Yes, true. So
all of us are learners, I think, collectively.
Yes, we are.
we'll grow as we learn
Yeah,
together.
but when I said experts, it's like you are a couple of steps. You and Kavita are a couple of steps ahead on these subjects.
Nobody is.
Not
We are all on a flat level playing field.
Because you have been there, the amount of time that you have immersed yourself in these subjects of employee engagement or preparing oneself for the 21st century from that perspective. But I really get that everyone is a learner.
Yeah, there is some element of what that remains constant. That's all. That
Yes.
limits it.
Hello, sir.
That's true.
You can work
Yes,
around
I hear somebody. Yes, hello.
Hello. I'm audible.
Yes.
that. Yeah.
I have just one question. Actually, basically, I am from construction industry, and we know okay, there is so many technology equipment, so we can manage our work from home. But in our construction industry, it is very tough to manage work from home because we have a different construction project locations at different areas, and this is the core hard work which employees standing there and to do work from the labors. So how we can manage these things in this time?
I know the construction part of business will, of course, where there is physical interface. But I think construction business is always also evolving. And there are a lot of prefabricated structures that are now being created. There are new ways and ways to kind of, construct a building through using 3D technology, printing and all. So I think things will change. Actually, rest as far as your pure construction, there has to be some physical presence and there's no way out. You can't remotely work. But remotely, you can manage a lot of stuff which you can prefabricate to the extent you can. You can design the point which is remotely sitting at home. But actual construction, yes, it has to be on the ground. So I don't think there is any solution as of today. But I think we can be there, in fact, and follow social distancing norms, follow the norms to maintain hygiene, and try to stay away as much from this COVID pandemic as such. It's the only way out because every problem doesn't have the solution the way it had existed so far. We'll have to redesign our work. We'll have to kind of, reconstruct the ways in which we can find solutions. We're living in a world of possibility where we have to discover these possibilities. We have to, as I said, we have to discover, design, then kind of, decide on what to do and how to do, and then probably deliver. So I think we have to collectively create an environment where we can find some solutions to these problems. Construction industry is definitely one of those where an immediate solution, of course, of physical distancing is possible in all cases.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Right. So with that, we can close our call for today. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Robin.
Thank you very much, in fact, and
And
it was-
also, thank you.
Thank you.
To be on this.
Thank you.
So great, Robin. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just trying to stop the recording. I think
Yeah.
happened with my computer. I am not able to stop it. Nothing, it just hung.
I think if it was the meeting anyway, it'll just.
Yeah, and it's not allowing me to do anything today.
Hmm.
Is there any chance from there you can stop the recording?
No, I can only please no. It says request recording permission from the host. So I guess